Welcome, friends. This is episode 58 of the Alabama Liberal Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about electability versus ideology versus ideas. Because ideas and ideology, they're not really the same thing, and I think we're confusing them a lot in this cycle. But you have certain candidates whose entire claim to the White House is that they're the most electable, and yet a lot of them are not electable at all. I look at Amy Klobuchar primarily. She's saying the whole reason I should be in this race is not because I'm exciting, it's not because I'm interesting. She literally said the biggest misconception of her at the South Carolina debate was that she's boring, and yet her whole thing is, I can win Minnesota. I know how to win in a red state. Minnesota has not voted for a Republican president in forever. They're the only state in America that did not vote for Ronald Reagan either time. Then you have other Minnesota politicians. Hubert Humphrey lost in a landslide. Walter Mondale lost in a landslide. Those were the two biggest defeats that Democrats have seen in the last 50 years. And most tellingly, she is not favored to win her home state. The Minnesota that she brings up all the time and goes all over the campaign trail talking about. The few polls they've done show that she could lose Minnesota to Bernie Sanders. And I have to look at that and think, you're so electable. You talk about how the people of Minnesota, they love you. Even though Minnesota is an outlier. They don't vote the same way that Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and Ohio do. And yet, you may not even capture a majority of the vote there inside the primary system. So the entire argument for Amy Klobuchar being in this race falls apart. The people that know her the best, the voters of Iowa, because Minnesota borders Iowa, they have some of the same media markets, they didn't vote for her. She came in fifth. The voters in her home state may not choose her. And yet her best showing so far is New Hampshire, which is far away from Minnesota, and they may have just been thinking like, oh, electability. Then you have Elizabeth Warren, who is still in the race, and still wildly passionate fan base that will not stop talking about her, no matter that she has no viable path to nomination. She could lose her home state of Oklahoma on March the 3rd. So you have two candidates talk a lot about electability and that Bernie Sanders is not electable, and yet I don't really find Amy Klobuchar, Elizabeth Warren to be more electable than Bernie Sanders. Maybe less so, which is saying something. I didn't think that was possible. Mike Bloomberg says, elect me. I'm the most electable. I can beat Donald Trump. I don't know that anybody has been watching Donald Trump and saying, you know who we should get in 2020? Another 70-year-old New York billionaire who had women sign non-disclosure agreements and has been sued for sexual harassment and is really a Republican and gave all this money to Republican candidates. We've never seen a case where an incumbent president has been beaten by somebody who is just like them. That just never has happened before. So Mike Bloomberg says he's the most electable, and yet he's declined to specify a single state where he can win a majority of the votes. On Super Tuesday, he's not favored to win any of the Super Tuesday states outright. When you start looking at this and you're seeing candidates who have no viable path, they can't win. Tom Steyer has become Soul Brother Steyer in a desperate attempt to beat Joe Biden in South Carolina. But I look at Steyer and I think, even if he loses South Carolina, even if he doesn't come in second or third, even if he comes in fourth, I still don't think he'll drop out. Because that's the thing, when you've got this vanity campaign that's churned through 5% of your net worth, dumping all this stuff into ads, you're almost incentivized to stay in there as long as you can and bleed the process dry. So even though Steyer is very, very unlikely to win a single state outright, you could turn on the TV right now and see an ad about how Tom Steyer's dad invented the ice cream cone or something like that. And when you've dumped that kind of money in, it's almost like, no, I'll stay until the convention. I'm not going anywhere. And I thought the last debate before South Carolina, the Nevada debate, they did have the right idea of at least getting Tom Steyer off the debate stage. So at least they were on the right track there. Then he was brought back for South Carolina. I do not know why. We've spent 4 years telling Americans Donald Trump is the worst president since Andrew Johnson, because he has no government experience. He doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. He's in over his head. He's a total moron. And yet we're going to say, oh, but Tom Steyer, you don't have any government experience, and you're a billionaire, and you're wealthy, and you fund all this stuff that maybe is ideologically opposed to what we believe in. We should get you to go up against Trump. Bloomberg and Steyer are only running because Trump opened the floodgates for morons like this and says, if you can be a billionaire, you don't have to have government experience. You don't have to be a mayor. You don't have to go to town halls. You don't have to know how bills are passed. You don't have to talk to state government, state representatives and state senators, and federal government, congressmen and senators, and talk to them and network and get things done. Tom Steyer, his whole argument is, I knew something was bad about climate crisis, which is why I funded the campaign to... Writing a check is not the same fucking thing as actual action. Billionaire donors, they used to know this. They would find candidates that they felt were ideologically similar to them, or at least wanted some of the same stuff they did, and write them a big check. But because dark money has flooded that process so much, and billionaires are able to contribute so much more than they used to, they now feel like, well, I wrote that guy $1 million. I'm as responsible for their success as they are. are. Mike Bloomberg puts Barack Obama in every TV ad that he's got. I mean, honestly, I find it almost offensive that Bloomberg, who never voted for Obama and never wanted him to be president, has got Barack Obama in every goddamn one of his ads talking about, oh, Mike Bloomberg, he's a builder, he did this, he did that. Obama was just introducing somebody, saying nice words about him, and now it's almost like Bradley Byrne and Trump in Alabama where he's sucking up to him left and right. Because they donate money to these causes. We heard Bloomberg say it. He goes, those 40 seats that the Democrats flipped in the House of Representatives, I did that. No, you wrote a check. That's not the same thing as good candidates with solid ground game and skills and campaigns who knew the right things to say and were not atrocious 70-year-old billionaires with all this checkered shit in their history that would turn people off for votes. So saying you did that, you got the House back when Nancy Pelosi took your money and different people like Tom Perez, they took your money and they knew what to do with it. They knew where to deploy your resources. That's why you're seeing him dump literally $500 million. I mean, he might as well set that on fire. I look at what Steyer and Bloomberg are doing, and they really make me sick. Tom Steyer, I started a bank to give home loans to black women so they could start businesses. I don't know if anybody's ever actually went and tried to get a home loan from the stuff he's talking about. It's very difficult. He doesn't give out a lot of money. The money he spent on his presidential campaign, that would have been 10,000 loans. His bank was literally sued for predatory lending practices. And Bloomberg, the same thing about his philanthropic works. If your philanthropic works are just paving the road for you to run for president and brag about it, there's not a rich person in America who hasn't done something good at one point or another. When you go outside the New York City Ballet, you can see David Koch Ballet Theater. The Koch brothers have funded cancer hospitals in New York. They've funded philanthropic works, ballet, opera, art museums, things like that. The Walton family, who suck so bad, I can't stand them. But in Arkansas, I think the female Walton heiress built some kind of state-of-the-art art museum in the middle of Bentonville, Arkansas. Her employers are like, that's great. Can we have health insurance? Oh, God, no. You can't have a fucking raise. Get out of here, surf. Very few ultra-billionaires, even the Koch brothers and Sheldon Adelson and just scummy people like that, haven't done some philanthropic works. So for Steyer to constantly say, I'm the one who got climate initiatives through Congress when he wrote a $10 million check, it really makes me sick because Gavin Newsom and people in California, right now, they're trying to do stuff. In California, there's Prop 13, which is trying to make public schools safer. They're going to remove any toxic materials. They're going to check the water levels. They're going to make sure all the drinking water's clean. I wish it applied to private schools because I think if they went through some of them, like our old friends Campbell Hall in episode 53, they would see private school, their water sucks and kids are actually drinking toxic water. You're paying $35,000 to send your kids to Flint, Michigan to go to school, basically. No rights, no laws, bad drinking water. They can kick you out at any time. Police state. And Bloomberg, he doesn't mention that he cut checks to Republicans for decades. He cut checks to Republicans for 20 years. He's about to become a Democrat, about to run for president. This was what Trump said. And people being like, well, I like that Bloomberg is not a Manchurian candidate. I like that he's self-funded. I like that he says what he means, that he can fund his own campaign. This was Trump's pitch to the American people. And so you'll have two billionaires from New York, demographically identical. I mean, I feel like the majority of the country is going to look at this and say, well, you got Bernie Sanders, who's from Brooklyn, you got Trump, who's from Queens, you got Bloomberg, who is mayor of all New York. It's possible to have a presidential race without somebody from New York City. Like, we can do it. When it comes down to the whole electability argument, I do think this is important. And it's been really strange to me to watch Democrats kind of almost scorn this question. They're almost resentful of it. They're almost like, shut up, don't talk about it. And it's kind of running backwards from how it should. Back last year in 2019, electability was brought up all the time. This is when there was a large field and a lot of good candidates, but they're like, oh, Kamala Harris, she's not electable. Beto O'Rourke, he's not electable. Cory Booker, he's not electable. Julian Castro, he's not electable. And that electability argument pushed out a lot of really great candidates like Kamala Harris particularly. And yet now that we're in the fucking primary and 3 states have voted, I'd be like, well, Elizabeth Warren, she has no viable path to nomination. Shut up. You don't know what you're talking about. It's almost as though people have become resentful of this question now that we're actually voting, whereas it's all I heard about in 2019. And of course, all of that overlaps with the voters' personal preferences. Because I remember in Iowa, they had different people coming and going from the polls, and like 2/3 of Iowa voters were like, yes, we want the person who's most likely to beat Trump, and that's the person I'm going to vote for anyway. What is the most important thing to you? Oh, I want somebody who can beat Donald Trump. That's more important than ideology. Who are you voting for? Bernie Sanders. It really just feels like the people are able to convince themselves and trick themselves into thinking the person that I like the most anyway is the person who's most electable, the person that already overlaps with my beliefs. We have empathy a lot more than most animals do, but people are still prisoners of their own perspective. The minute they're born, you see things the way you see them. It's very hard to get in the head of somebody else. So a lot of people are naturally predisposed to think, well, I'm like the majority of Americans. Everybody thinks how I think. If I want to see private health insurance banned and abolished, most of America probably wants the same thing because premiums suck. It's very easy to convince yourselves that the majority of America wants to ban guns because you've seen a poll that says that. And then, of course, the reality is when people actually show up and vote, that's one of the last things that they're actually thinking about. Very few people who are not already going to vote Democratic are even thinking, I'm a swing voter, guns scare the shit out of me, so I need to make sure I vote for the Democratic candidate. I think it's all too easy for people to convince themselves, I'm a woman and I live in a big city and I care about seeing a female president, so Elizabeth Warren's the natural choice and that's who's going to beat Trump. Hillary Clinton could not beat Donald Trump, and he was a lot weaker as a non-incumbent. I mean, back in 2016, he was a very weak candidate. In 2020, he's an incumbent. He's got the full weight and resources of the federal government behind him. The last 3 presidents have been reelected. We haven't seen an incumbent lose since George H.W. Bush, which is almost 30 years ago, 1992. Incumbents are not easy to beat in this country. What do we need to do? We need to get somebody who is demographically identical to Hillary Clinton, who couldn't beat Trump in 2016. Elizabeth Warren is a blonde female senator from New England in her 70s. Who used to be a Republican and then became a Democrat, and is wonky and talks a lot about policy and has a lot of plans. Gee, does that remind you of anyone? I'm just thinking out loud. Except Hillary Clinton had the benefit polling better than Elizabeth Warren does in rural areas and also being better known, at the time better liked. I mean, before she ran, she was the Secretary of State. She had the highest approval ratings of any Democrat. She had higher ones than Bernie Sanders did. Hillary Clinton was better liked, better known, more famous, more money, didn't scare Wall Street, didn't scare every powerful person in America into saying we should dump a shitload of money in Trump's super PAC to beat her, raise more money than Trump did. Every advantage that she had, Elizabeth Warren will not have. Hillary Clinton knew a lot about foreign policy, as being the former Secretary of State, former First Lady, former Senator, who also 9/11 was in her district as she was from New York. So she had a ton of foreign policy experience. Different people who care about the military felt very comfortable with her as president. Elizabeth Warren at a debate stage, they'll ask her the foreign policy question, and you just tell that it's not her focus. She doesn't care about that. It's just very obvious that that's not the main thing she's focused on, not the main thing she knows about. And sometimes they'll ask her foreign policy, and she'll have to be asked the same question 2 and 3 times before she'll answer it. This is a big deal because foreign policy is the single thing the American president controls. That's why Trump is such a disaster. It's probably the biggest reason he's such a disaster. All the shit people were really afraid about, like, oh, Trump will come in, he'll build the wall, start executing people outside the White House lawn. A lot of the domestic stuff, you got to get stuff passed through Congress. He can do a lot of stuff with foreign policy. And so it is concerning that Joe Biden and Pete Buttigieg, who clearly know a lot about foreign policy, clearly have thought a lot about it. Biden has the most experience of anybody in that field. They know the military. They would know how to command it. And Warren, I had 3 brothers, and they were all in the military, and 2 other brothers were Republican, and only one was a Democrat, and they're all voting for me. So I can win people that are Republican if they're, as long as they're blood relatives of mine. Saying that you have brothers who joined the military as soldiers, that doesn't mean shit. Like, I knew people from my high school that joined as soldiers. That doesn't mean I would necessarily know, like, here's what I should do about Afghanistan. I'm not convinced she knows more about foreign policy than somebody who watches Homeland would. Electability. Let's talk about it because this is something that people are thinking about. Okay, so here's the biggest thing about the Bernie Sanders people. They say, you know what? These lamestream Democrats that are so phony, Al Gore and Hillary Clinton and John Kerry, and they couldn't win, and what makes you think that these people are going to do any better than Bernie Sanders could? That's a myth, and they've sold themselves this myth for a long time. With Al Gore, you're talking about a candidate who won Florida, but they stopped the recount. So it's like, yes, I guess we didn't anticipate that the Supreme Court would issue an unprecedented decision to stop a recount in Florida, and so that was stolen away from him on those grounds. Then with Hillary Clinton, 3 million more popular votes than Donald Trump got, and yet he won by 3 states. We didn't think that was mathematically possible to win the popular vote by that much and lose the Electoral College by that much. I really consider those to be outliers. I truly do. And if you look at it historically, it would have been kind of surprising if Hillary did win. Except for FDR and Harry Truman, there hasn't been 12 years of Democratic presidents since Andrew Jackson and Van Buren. fucking 200 years ago. Andrew Jackson and Martin Van Buren were the last times you had back-to-back Democratic presidents for 12 years. Last two times we had back-to-back Democratic presidents is because the first one died in office, JFK and FDR. And then LBJ and Harry Truman took over. Historically, everything was against Hillary, and I still think she did better than Bernie Sanders would have. And the argument that I keep hearing is, well, you don't know anything. You predicted Hillary Clinton would win in 2016, and Bernie Sanders would have won. Think about it. Hillary Clinton beats Bernie Sanders 2-1 in a Democratic primary where majority of the people voting are left-leaning, meaning majority of people voting are sympathetic to Bernie Sanders. He would do better in those races than he would in the general election. How can you say, well, Hillary, who couldn't beat Trump, we should have got the guy who Hillary beat. Bernie Sanders lost to Hillary lost to Trump, therefore Bernie Sanders could beat Trump. I can't follow that math. That equation makes no fucking sense to me, and I think if people weren't blinded by ideology, it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to them either. They say, well, Bernie Sanders, he would have won Michigan and Wisconsin because he won the primary in those states. Maybe. You know where we lost the primary? Pennsylvania, Ohio, Florida, Virginia. Even if he picks up Michigan and Wisconsin, you got to pick up 3. He still loses Pennsylvania, probably by a bigger margin, and he probably loses Virginia too, because Virginia was razor close, and Hillary even picked Tim Kaine as her VP. She still almost lost Virginia. So he loses all the states that she does, plus probably Virginia on top of that. And even if he picks up Michigan and Wisconsin, he's still 2 states behind, if you just go by that logic from the primary votes. Now, I'm not sure you can. I'm not sure you can say that Trump wouldn't have still won Wisconsin and Michigan. But even their best case scenario, Bernie Sanders still loses. But they can't get over this idea that in 2016, she blew a race that was infinitely winnable, even though, as I said, historically it was very unlikely that another Democrat was going to win. She obviously had no idea that the Russians would be trying their best to help Trump. James Comey issued a letter, and I'm sure people would like to lock him up in a basement. She didn't know Barack Obama would sit on the sidelines like he did because he was too afraid, as kind of is typical of Obama. He was overly cautious. He was too afraid. He didn't think that he needed to step in. I feel like that's Obama's biggest flaw, being overly cautious about everything. And so in 2016, he's like, I don't want to weigh in because that could backfire. And they go through and they make these models and they run through all these scenarios and ramifications. And Trump's just like, fuck it. Of course the Russians are out for Hillary. He just comes in and just does shit. And I feel like sometimes if you could take some of those balls, some of those cojones that Trump and Bush and all those people have and put it behind a Democratic brain, like an actual mind that's not broken, that actually works, you would really have something there. First, Obama didn't want to weigh in 2016. They've said in this cycle, in 2020, Barack Obama is out of the White House. He can never run for president again. He never will run for anything else the rest of his life. His political career is over. He has a production deal with Netflix. He has nothing to lose to come out 6 months ago and say Bernie Sanders is not a Democrat. Russians have helped him. He's overly sympathetic to Vladimir Putin and a lot of different things. Between Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump, Russia doesn't care who wins that race. Either one of those outcomes is good for them personally. He should have done that. But instead what we heard was, well, Barack Obama really doesn't want Bernie Sanders to be the nominee, but he doesn't think he will, so he's not going to say anything. And of course, I heard people say, if he really felt like Bernie could get the nomination, then he would come out and probably say something. Well, now Bernie Sanders has won 3 states in a row. Where the hell is Obama's big speech denouncing Bernie Sanders? Now would be the time. But what he's going to do is he's going to wait till after South Carolina, and he's going to wait till after Super Tuesday. He's going to wait till Bernie's got a fucking delegate lead that you can't match, and then come out there and say, oh, but by the way, people shouldn't be for him. This is exactly what the Republicans did in 2016. They waited till Trump had way too big a delegate lead. He was too huge. He was too big. They couldn't take him down. And then he got it. And people would say, but what would be so wrong with that? What would be so wrong with letting Bernie Sanders be the nominee? You don't know that he'll lose to Trump. You don't know anything. People have been wrong about this over and over again. Here's what I do know. Al Gore and Hillary Clinton were flukes. But even if you look at those individual races and you say the Supreme Court doesn't interfere in 2000, Al Gore becomes the next president of the United States. The Russians don't fuck with Hillary all throughout 2016, and James Comey doesn't write a letter, and Obama comes out and says more than he does. Hillary Clinton becomes the next president of the United States. Those were very close races. Those are popular votes. The only candidates in my lifetime who have lost the popular vote are Michael Dukakis and John Kerry. I know now people think John Kerry is like a lame stream, but like, oh, he's so lame. He was a Democrat. He's establishment. At the time John Kerry ran, they viewed him as liberal. The candidates in my lifetime that have won the popular vote are Al Gore, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, and Bill Clinton. These are unquestionably more moderate, less liberal candidates than John Kerry is. 100% less liberal than Michael Dukakis is. If we go back and look, there is a lot of body of evidence to say that a center-left candidate or a moderate Democrat or somebody who at least can appeal to people that are not dyed-in-the-wool, ultra-leftist, progressive, let's get rid of private health insurance, let's praise Fidel Castro in a 60 Minutes interview. That was a great place to praise him, by the way. Praising Fidel Castro in front of 60 Minutes audience. The average age of 60 Minutes viewers is 80 years old. Most people are watching 60 Minutes through a fucking oxygen tank. Yeah, Fidel Castro did some good things. That was real fucking smart, Bernie. That just shows what instincts he has. Sanders is basically Michael Dukakis and John Kerry. Elizabeth Warren is too. Elizabeth Warren, everybody talking about she's so electable. Massachusetts politicians haven't done so hot since Kennedy. You got Mitt Romney, John Kerry, Michael Dukakis, Bill Weld, Ted Kennedy, Deval Patrick, on and on. The list of Massachusetts losers goes. No, I don't think either one of those candidates are electable. Typically, Democrats do very well when you have Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama. These were all candidates from Middle America. And I know right now, I already hear people, Barack Obama's from Hawaii. That's not Middle America. Actually, he was born in Hawaii, and then he moved to Indonesia. He spent part of his life in Indonesia. But where did he begin his political career? But he lived in Hawaii, Indonesia, New York. But he didn't begin his political career until he got to Chicago. What coastline does Chicago border? I mean, Illinois is Middle America. Other than Minnesota, it's probably the most liberal state in Middle America, but it's still not a flyover state. So he starts his political career in Chicago. He becomes a senator from Illinois. Governor of Arkansas, governor of Georgia. If you go by that dynamic, younger, brilliant candidates from Middle America, Pete Buttigieg would seem to be the most electable if you just go by that model. Now, I'm not totally sold that he's more electable than Joe Biden is. In my personal opinion, Joe Biden's the most electable out of those candidates. But you can make a case that he would certainly be more electable than Bernie Sanders would be. People always point to these polls and they say, but Bernie Sanders, he's got a 10-point lead over Donald Trump nationally. If you really look at those polls and you break them down, yes, he may do exactly the same as Hillary did. But if you can't pick up purple states, you cannot become president. And people would say, but there's one poll that we had where he beat Trump in Texas. If you legitimately think Bernie Sanders is going to beat Trump in Texas, you're a fucking idiot. But there's a poll that says he would. Poll that says Hillary was going to beat Trump in Texas in 2016. There's a poll that says Trump was going to beat Ted Cruz in 2016. There's polls that say Beto O'Rourke should be the senator instead of Ted Cruz. Texas is one of those states that constantly comes up as purple. It just isn't. I mean, it's just not been since LBJ left there and Ann Richards is no longer governor. I think people put a lot of time and energy into Texas because if we flip Texas, we don't have to worry. Again, the biggest state for the Republicans in terms of the Electoral College. And I understand the inclination to flip Texas. Joe Biden possibly could, although I kind of doubt it. I still think Biden's better chances are like Phoenix and Florida, probably even Georgia would be easier to win than Texas would be for any Democrat, but especially Joe Biden. I think people have gotten in this mindset of, I love Bernie Sanders. I love his ideology. Bernie Sanders is the most ideologically consistent candidate in the race. That sounds like a good thing. It's not. Bernie Sanders has not had a new idea since he was a teenager back in the 1800s. So basically, when he went to college in 1820, formed the basis of his intellectual thought. And so when people show pictures of Bernie in the 60s and he's marching, he's kicking and screaming, they're dragging him away because he protested with Martin Luther King Jr., he marched with him. That's Bernie. He's locked in that 1960s. Down with Vietnam. He brings up Vietnam a lot, brings up Henry Kissinger a lot, brings up the CIA coups, as he did in the South Carolina debate, the past CIA coups. It's not that surprising that he's in love with Fidel Castro and honeymooned in the Soviet Union, which he did when he got married, and has been very soft on Russia. He's formed in that 1960s echo chamber where the United States had this huge military-industrial complex that was killing a shitload of people in Cambodia and Vietnam. And the Russians were somehow trying to preserve freedom and unity and dove and peace and all that bullshit, all their party line. And that got filtered in through a lot of very susceptible college kids in that era. I think a lot of younger people today, when they just hear Bernie, be like, well, the CIA is evil. They're like, yeah, sure, absolutely it is. Because he's talking about like Iran in the 1950s and Guatemala when Eisenhower was president and different regime changes and things like that. The United States did go around trying to snuff out any democracies that we felt could become communist and that Russia would take over. Probably in a lot of those cases, we totally overreacted and shouldn't have done that. But basically, it was a Cold War between the United States and Russia. If the United States backed certain fascist dictatorships, Russia would back communist ones. The difference was very small. Fidel Castro comes to power and he's like, we got to get rid of the authoritarian governments. Absolutely. Then he becomes the leader of Cuba. Authoritarian governments are not so bad, as a matter of fact, and it just really depends on who's in charge of them. And by the way, all gay people need to go in the gulag, and if you've ever had any private wealth, I'm going to need to take that from you. And today's revolutionary is tomorrow's authoritarian. Come in on a wave of power and say, we got to get rid of this shit. This is terrible. We saw this with the Arab Spring. A lot of those countries that were getting rid of dictators that have been around forever. In Egypt, you get rid of Mubarak, and then the Muslim Brotherhood comes in and becomes just as bad, and then they get overthrown, and a new general, Sisi, comes in, and he's pretty much the same thing. It's just very hard to get out of that mindset. Today's revolutionary is going to be tomorrow's establishment. People like AOC, they don't want to tear down the democratic establishment. They want to rebuild it in their image and for their profit machines. Okay, I saw where AOC has a fucking super PAC this cycle. Now, you might look at that and think that's the hypocrisy of hypocrisies about dark money and its corrupting influence and how insidious it is and how cancerous, and then turn around and create a super PAC. People like her always say the rules of the game are that people can dump limited amounts of money, they can control it, they can do these things, so we're going to rig it in our favor. This is how every revolutionary who has ever come to power thinks. We're going to change the game, we're going to rip down the system, we're going to change everything. Then they get in there and they'll be like, it would really be easier if we just co-opted the system's tools for our own ends. And of course, in 10, 20 years, AOC is going to try to become the new Nancy Pelosi. She's not trying to overthrow that shit. One of my favorite quotes of all time is, slaves dream not of freedom, but of becoming masters. And I really see it that way. I see a lot of people like AOC come into power on a wave of revolt. In 20 years, it'll be, AOC was taking money from this contractor who was overpaying her to build this housing project. I don't know anything about this. This is a smear job, blah, blah, blah. There will be a corruption scandal built around her at one point or another. It just always happens that way. And when you look at the machine that Bernie is building, he's not trying to flip red Democratic districts. He's trying to take over existing Democratic districts. This is the only place he's had success with the squad and with various different candidates that he's put through. Those 40 candidates they're talking about in the House of Representatives that flipped it from red to blue, none of those are Bernie candidates that actually have to become moderate. They're really more Clinton Democrats, truthfully. A lot of those people could lose if Bernie Sanders is the nominee in 2020. It's saying something that in the Alabama Senate race, Doug Jones has got one of the closest Senate races in the country, probably going to lose, but we don't know that for a fact. And people said that in 2017 and he won, but he's desperate to get Biden at the top of a ticket because he's like, if there's one Democratic candidate that could help me, it's Joe Biden. When he ran in the 2017 race, a lot of national Democrats, they wanted to come campaign for Doug Jones. He didn't want them to. He didn't want Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. And he didn't want a lot of people to come. AOC, who wasn't really a thing at that time, but if she would have been, he'd have been like, hell no, you can't come down here. Nancy Pelosi, stay home. The only person he let come campaign for him was Joe Biden. And that's because he knew how well Joe Biden did with not only older black voters. They always say that. They go, well, Bernie does well with young black voters and Joe Biden does well with older black voters. Who actually fucking votes? Because that's where you have to look at it. Like, I love it when people talk about Bernie Sanders. He does so well with the youth vote. They don't vote in big enough numbers for it to really make any difference whatsoever. Since I've been alive, the candidate who got the highest percentage of the youth vote? Michael Dukakis. And he got wiped out. The worst defeat for a Democrat in my lifetime. Hands down it was. Because even Kerry's defeat was pretty close. Dukakis is the only person in my lifetime who's lost by a significant percentage, and he had a ton of the youth vote. Barack Obama, yes, he got a big percentage of the youth vote, but he beat John McCain so bad in both population and electoral college, it really made no difference. I think only like North Carolina was the only state that he wouldn't have won without the high youth turnout that he had, and it still wouldn't have made any difference. I mean, he still would have become president. So I look at like who actually votes. And if old people are fucking terrified of Bernie Sanders, that's a huge problem because that is by far the biggest voting demographic in America, especially in midterms. When you go to a polling place in a midterm election, it literally looks like a morgue in there just about. I mean, your average voter is 90-something years old. It's like, oh, I got out of the nursing home today. I get extra Jell-O if I go vote. And they're all excited to get out of there and go vote. A lot of old people don't like Bernie Sanders because when Trump says things like the stock market's booming, he immediately goes to, most Americans don't own a share in the stock market. That's not true. And Democrats should stop saying that. They're not day traders, trades every single day. But if you belong to a pension, which a lot of his people, the labor unions, they all belong to pension funds that are tied to the stock market. If you have a 401k, you're tied to the stock market. If you have an IRA, you're tied to the stock market. If you have fucking Social Security payments, you're tied to the stock market. Very unlikely that somebody over the age of 65, financial health is not tied to the stock market in some way. I've never seen it be like, oh no, I don't own stocks and I don't have a pension and I don't really have a retirement, but all my money's wrapped up in gold bricks. That applies to very few people. And even with somebody's house, it's unlikely that the stock market collapses and you have a Great Depression with the stock market, but housing prices are fine. I look at myself, I don't fucking work for Goldman Sachs. I'm not Gordon Gekko. I don't have a fucking suit and a tie and I'm just like, buy, sell, trade. Oh my God, Steve Jobs is a genius. Warren Buffett, he should be God. Warren Buffett should be on the dollar bill. All these CNBC fools. CNBC, if you go on there and say, I'm a billionaire, they'll suck your dick practically on television. Like, it's embarrassing to see the disconnect between MSNBC and CNBC just about. On MSNBC, all the policies that they're advocating for, if you went on CNBC and said that, you probably wouldn't be allowed to leave the building alive. I'm not one of those guys, but when Bernie Sanders, when he declares a hatred of the banks and a hatred of Wall Street and talks about we got to bring it down, we got to rig the system, it will trigger a massive sell-off in the stock market, massive financial shenanigans, recession like you wouldn't believe. Just the fact that he would be elected would create a recession, and he wouldn't know how necessarily to solve it because, again, he's had the same economic thought since the 1940s. You asked him the same question today, he would give you the same answer 50 fucking years ago. Nothing has been updated in his process about deficits, about the stock market, about socialism, about healthcare. None of these new information is really getting in because his ideology is ironclad. He is the most ideologically consistent candidate. And so people who say, I don't like that Mitt Romney flip-flops around John Kerry, he flip-flopped on one or two things, I'm not a fan of that. The problem is ideology. And ideology is something Bernie Sanders has in spades. Ideas are not always tied to ideology. Andrew Yang is not an ideologue. He had one idea. And I don't really like candidates who think they have to be president to institute their one big idea. Andrew Yang is like, universal basic income. We heard you the first 500 times. Why do you need to be president? Because automation is going to kill a lot of jobs and universal basic income will save you. Okay, but why do you need to be president to institute the changes you're talking about? Of course, he doesn't. A single idea, like a germ, and you can spread that without being president. There's ideas I have. I spread them all over YouTube. I write them online. I think America and Canada should merge. I think we should be one country. 60 states, the United States of North America, America and Canada should be one thing. It would be foolish to think I had to run for president and become president to push that change forward or to even advocate that change or to have the loudest microphone on that change. Michael Bloomberg and Tom Steyer, what they should be doing is taking their fortune, flooding the market with the things that they care about the most, climate crisis. But to think you have to become president rather than put your money behind a candidate who has a better chance than you do to become president, it's really ego. So people who run just specifically to see one or two ideas instituted, Marianne Williamson, I think she wanted to give everybody crystals in America. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know why she was running. But supposedly she had these ideas. Candidates with single ideas are usually one-issue voters or one-trick ponies. They almost never get the nomination. But Bernie Sanders is a little different in that he does have these ideas. Elizabeth Warren has a lot of ideas, but their ideology is what people are really responding to. This idea that you can be ultra-leftist, that you can have had the same ideas since you were a teenager. Basically, the last half century has changed nothing in your eyes. In the 1960s, I could see where your ideas would be like Bernie Sanders. Segregation was still the law of the land in the Southeast. My wife and I, we could not have got married in the Southeast. We would have had to go north. We would have had to move north. Our kids would have been harassed every single day. Of course, in California, that just about happens, and we're not in the Southeast, but that's a different story. At least we legally could get married. There's segregation going on. Every left-wing figure that you're watching, JFK, RFK, MLK, they're all getting assassinated left and right. The Vietnam War is raging. There's no reason to be at Vietnam, and yet they've drafted people. They're forcing you to go. People like Bernie are not going to go to war. I know that for a fact. They're going to try every way they can to get out of war. So are people like Trump, by the way. All these different elements going on. Segregation, institutionalized racism in the Southeast, Vietnam, people getting killed left and right for a war that they don't believe in, popular left-wing figures getting assassinated and killed. You could see where that shapes somebody's viewpoint. to be like, JFK did the Bay of Pigs and it didn't work out, but he saved us from the Cuban Missile Crisis, but he didn't want to reinvade Cuba. Maybe people thought he was too soft on communism. Did the CIA kill him? Did the communists kill him? Did the mafia kill him? Either way, it looks like some kind of corrupt institution was really behind it and not just some lone lunatic. When you're in that mindset, and that's your formative years of the Kennedy assassination and Watergate and Nixon and I am not a crook, it can give you that viewpoint. And that absolutely looks like the same time period that we're in, where Trump is basically Nixon combined with George Wallace. I mean, Trump's ideas are shaped by that same time period. Probably one part Nixon, two parts George Wallace, except not as competent as either one of them. One part Nixon, one part George Wallace, and one part Daffy Duck. All of these figures that we're seeing, their ideologies are shaped by a world that really doesn't exist anymore. I used to say Trump wants to bring back Teddy Roosevelt's America, and Bernie Sanders wants to bring back FDR's America. Either way, you are looking to the past. And so I do agree with what Buttigieg is saying. You have Trump, who's nostalgic for the social order of the 1950s, and you have Bernie Sanders, who's overly nostalgic for the revolutionary politics of the 1960s. It could get very ugly. Bernie and Trump fans, they share some similarities. Overwhelmingly, when I see them online, I know that they have female fans, but I don't see them. Online, I see Trump. Bernie has young, white, male fans. They are almost exclusively fit into that bracket. Trump fans are usually older white males, but either way, it could be the first time you ever see like white on white mobs clashing in the streets, right? Like there could be riots. And I liked it when basically the different reasons why Bernie's not electable was, well, there could be a civil war if he's the nominee, but you go ahead, nominate who you want to, right? When you come down to electability, I truly believe Joe Biden and Pete Buttigieg are the only ones who are remotely electable. Could he beat Trump? Bernie Sanders could beat Trump if there's a recession. And the recession couldn't be because of the coronavirus. Like it would have to be because of institutionalized corruption. Could that happen in the next 6 months? Sure. We're halfway there already. I'm not going to say it's impossible for Bernie Sanders to beat Donald Trump. But even if he's the nominee, and even if he beats him, you're going to have a recession start very early into his term because Wall Street is going to be panicked. What Bernie's done is very stupid. He's essentially told every powerful person in America, if I'm elected, you will lose a ton of money. What you got to do is be like Buttigieg and pretend to be on their side, and then when you get in there, start raising their taxes and sometimes think people are overly friendly to business. I think they're just trying to get into where they can do something about it, and then they'll change what they want to change. But for Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders especially to say, I want to break up the telecom companies, AT&T and Comcast. I want to break up Facebook and Google. I want to get rid of fossil fuels, get rid of private health insurance completely, complete sector of bottom feeders and middlemen, and probably the most powerful lobbying group in America is health insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies. Even the American Medical Association doesn't want what he's saying because doctors are very well paid in this country. People like doctors, but they don't realize doctors have fought a lot of the healthcare changes that people want to do. Then you're going to have Wall Street. The entirety of Wall Street is against him. Banks in general, people in the financial services sector, probably big agricultural companies. You're seeing a pattern, I'm hoping. If big tech, big oil, big pharma, healthcare, Wall Street, big banks, the military-industrial complex, basically, if all the world's most powerful people are against your nomination and nobody sees any gain in it and they're going to fight like hell to stop it because they've got more money and power, you see where it could be very hard to elect somebody like that. And even if by some miracle they are elected, then he's in office with a Congress that doesn't really support him because Republicans have regained control of the House of Representatives and they've regained probably a bigger majority than they had in the Senate. And so you have a hostile Congress. It looks more and more doubtful that even if he were the president, he would be able to accomplish anything. And when they ask him things like this, he goes, I'm ready to lead a revolution. How often have those revolutions worked out? We hear that all the time. Reagan revolution, Bush wanted an evangelical revolution, Obama was a revolutionary candidate at the time that he was running. We hear about revolutions quite often in American politics. We don't see them actually really go a lot of places. Like Occupy Wall Street was a revolution that eventually fizzled out and went nowhere. When Trump took office, there was the Women's March. They said this year's Women's March had like way less people, the fewest people that have shown up since he's been in office. Black Lives Matter was a huge thing. It petered out. I think the American people generally call them slow cooker presidents. They like people like Joe Biden, set it and forget it. They really don't want to be enlisted in a revolution. People are lazy, and they kind of don't want to be out in the streets having to march and raise hell and talk all the time. They really want to nominate a president who they feel will do that for them. And we saw that in Obama's presidency. I voted for Obama. I did my part, and I'm going to go to sleep for 8 years. Wake me up. Actually, never. If you could, that would be great. I want to go to the beach. I don't want to to deal with this shit. And even though Obama was elected in 2010, they didn't bother to show up and vote in the midterms, and then it got wiped out. And then for 6 years, all we heard was, why is Obama not doing what he promised he would do? Why is he not doing anything? Why is he so weak and ineffective? Not keeping in mind that a president is not a king. We even saw AOC lower expectations. Bernie's biggest and most popular issue by far is Medicare for all. That's what most people that are voting for him that are not dyed-in-the-wool Bernie bros, because there's the Bernie bros who would take a bullet for that son of a bitch. But I feel like the people that are not that way, I feel like they are responding to this idea of Medicare for all because their health costs suck. They're way too high. They don't like it. I've been fortunate not to have any serious medical illness, but I could easily see that being a primary selling point for Bernie Sanders. Your health insurance plans in this country are crazy. I could see where people would be responding to that. But basically, even AOC came out and was like, well, he's not king. He can't just wave a wand and give everybody Medicare for all. So even before he's the nominee and even before he's elected, his biggest cheerleader in the Congress, his least reasonable, moderate proponent, a woman who's in a very, 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 very heavily Democratic district and has absolutely nothing to lose by full force backing Medicare for all, is setting expectations lower by saying, well, he can't do it single-handedly. If even she is not drinking the Kool-Aid to the extent of saying, like, it will happen, and it will happen in the first 2 years, you can see where it's going to be a very, very big uphill climb. So you have a candidate that may somehow kind of sort of be able to squeak by in electoral college votes, but he will not pick the Senate back up. Doug Jones will lose his race. All of the Senates were trying to flip, except for perhaps Susan Collins in Maine. Most of those will stay in Republican hands. The best case scenario for President Sanders is to face a Senate like what we've got today, and he could even lose seats from what we've got today. The House of Representatives, you could easily lose that too, because a lot of these people like Alyssa Slotnick, very conservative Michigan district that she picked up, they're already mad at these people like her and Katie Porter and different people for voting to impeach Trump. And if you put Bernie Sanders at the head of a ticket, they may be like, all right, this is too much fucking chaos. We like these candidates, but not that much. You have the House of Representatives going back into Republican hands, which would be a disaster. I would encourage people not to put your ideological preferences ahead of electability, because if a president is not electable, they can't do anything. They can't get anything done. And we saw people do that with Dukakis. We've seen people do that with George McGovern and Adlai Stevenson. Basically, every time the Democrats have run far-left candidate, they get beat. Even FDR didn't run as a far-left candidate. FDR became a far-left candidate. He became the guy behind Social Security. But he had to also make compromises like not doing a thing about segregation in the Southeast and creating internment camps for Japanese prisoners. His civil rights record was pretty lousy. I think that even he had to make a lot of compromises that we just simply wouldn't like or wouldn't tolerate in this day and age. But at the time he was running, and the Great Depression was raging. So Bernie's path would be similar to FDR's. You'd have to have a massive financial collapse, and then people turn to him and say, hey, this is Wall Street greed, and it's what you've been talking about for 60 years straight. You got to do something about this. But even if you had a financial crisis triggered by the coronavirus, people might still be like, well, we need somebody like Trump or Bloomberg or some asshole like that to get us out of this mess, because they know a lot about money and the way it is. So I'm still not sure that an economic collapse would necessarily help Bernie, because Trump has so tied himself into being, I'm the economic genius. I'm the one who can pull you out of this mess. Bernie Sanders, he's never had a private job. He's been sponging off the government teat for decades. He talks about being anti-establishment. He's been in fucking Congress for 30 years. I'm the one who's not. So even then, it might not necessarily help him, because too many old people, quite frankly, they are just too dependent on a good stock market, and their housing prices not going down a whole lot to really take a gamble at this late in life. And they're the biggest voting group, which is why you sometimes see nothing really changing. From an ideas perspective, sorry, people like Yang and Tom Steyer and all these people with their one single ideas, term limits for Tom Steyer. You don't need to be president to institute that shit. Elizabeth Warren's plans and all the stuff she wants to do, she actually could do more for it. In the Senate, if she stays there, she could sponsor bills and get those passed. She really has no reason to be president. She just has a desire to. And somebody like Bernie Sanders, a tireless cheerleader for progressivism and economic rights and workers' rights and labor unions, and all those things are admirable. But they would be just as admirable in the Senate, where he's tried to pass 400 bills and has struggled to pass hardly any of them. He's got one of the worst records in the Senate for not passing bills. I don't think that would be different by him necessarily being a Democrat in the White House. So I do favor electability over the idea of ideology or any candidate's one ideas or any of their plans. Hillary Clinton had a shitload of plans. She had as many plans as Elizabeth Warren did. People didn't care. It didn't make any difference. It was hard to get those out there. It was hard to get people to hear them. And so I think Elizabeth Elizabeth Warren's biggest contribution to this race has been the systematic murdering of Michael Bloomberg, the dissection of him as a terrible candidate and dissecting him in 100 different ways. And so I'm grateful for her for that. But when you have candidates like Bloomberg and Steyer who have not said a single state they could win, and Amy Klobuchar and Warren who could lose their home states, what the fuck are you doing, guys? And then at the South Carolina debate to have Bill Whitaker say, Joe Biden, if you lose South Carolina, will you drop out of the race? Joe Biden, no matter what happens in South Carolina, he's going to win Alabama on our March 3rd primary. On March 3rd, he's going to pick up at least 3 states. Could be 5, but I'm saying at least 3. Other than him and Buttigieg, you will not have had a candidate win a single state, and they're encouraging him, oh, let's throw some dirt on this guy's corpse, this old fucking lifeless loser. And Bill Whitaker, of all goddamn people, he's so with it. Mr. Youth himself, 60 Minutes correspondent. I know the media hates Biden, but to see them put so fine a spin on it, whereas they've not asked Klobuchar and Warren, hey, you guys going to drop out if you lose your home states? It's almost incredible. Thanks for listening, everybody. Join us for episode 59.